Hi, everybody. I appreciate you've just had 3 great speakers in a row, so I'm going to try to keep you in the room. Get your coffee, but come back, please. So let's just start right away. I'm going to tell you 3 stories, but I'm going to start with something that really kind of rocked my world and maybe yours too. How many of you recognize where that is up there? Do you see that? I kind of gave it away. The answer is on the slide. Do you know where that is? To the left-hand side? I hear Wireless Road. Very well read from the slide. Thank you. So, does anyone know what that attack was? That's basically a ransomware screen on a traffic board. But do you know what ransomware type it was? Wannacry, very good. 200,000 more, actually, than 200,000 victims worldwide in over 150 countries. But the image of Wannacry that I use in my previous presentations, and the one that really resonated through the world, was this picture from Thailand, because it illustrated the global effect of this type of malware and the impact that it can have on our daily lives. Not just some strange esoteric thing, but our daily lives. The way that we heard about it was because our partner in Europe, Telefonica, was massively hit by Wannacry. And really, you know, I was surprised about how much cybersecurity concerns were actually originating and centralized and focused from Bangkok when I started doing my research, because how many of you have heard of the fact that there are Russians and Chinese people and Canadians and French people all operating cybercriminal rings, but then from Bangkok? And that the Thai police are regularly stopping darknet markets that are being hosted from Bangkok. How many knew that? I didn't know that. So actually, I realized that you have a lot more concerns around cybersecurity than I originally would have thought. Even, you know, I read the other day that ThaiCert, who operates locally, who's like the government computer emergency response team, had recently done a forensics evaluation around the Sony hack. Does everyone remember the Sony hack? Yeah, and we kind of blamed North Korea for the Sony attack, because the suspicion was that Mandiant had said, well, they did this because there was this movie that was going to be released by Sony. In order to get to the movie, they hacked Sony. Some of you are laughing, but the servers that were used for the Sony hack were also located in Bangkok. And it was when, did you guys know that? Yeah, so it was amazing how many of these things are coming from here. And this is a real photo of the Thai police actually recently arresting the guy that ran Infraud, which is a darknet marketplace. We're going to talk about that more later. Why is this happening? Well, because hackers are going to hack. And the 3 stories I'm going to tell you are all revolving around a type of cybercriminal hacker, state-sponsored attacker. Call them what you want, but they basically hack from a fundamental set of motivations. They hack because they're having fun. Hackers hack for fun. It's like a puzzle. They want to see how far they can get, and so they hack. But they also hack when they're good at it. They also realize, hey, it's not just fun, I can make some money off of it. So they hack for profit. And they don't only hack for profit. Eventually, when there's enough profit, they hack for politics. And that means they can either be hacktivists or they can work for a state. But those are the 3 categories of hackers we're going to focus on. And of course, you have, you know, very commonly the insider threat, which is a hacker that comes from within an organization but can manifest itself as an individual attacker or a cyber criminal or a state-sponsored hacktivist-like hacker. So what we also see is it's very hard when we actually see all these different attacks to try to figure out who is behind it. Which category of hacker and which thing is it? Well, the reason it's so hard is because they graduate from their motivation. They're also kind of recycling their tools. So the tools they use as an individual hacker, as a state-sponsored attacker, as a hacktivist, they kind of look the same. And the modus operandi is different because the financial resources that are sitting behind it are different, but they kind of look similar. So attribution, trying to figure out who did it, is a sort of holy grail in cybersecurity. We usually don't always know. And by the way, so I gave you the 3 categories. That is the actual in the middle, the FBI most wanted list for cyber criminals. So if these guys show up at your birthday party, you know who to call. And that is a joke around Kim Jong-un's password, that he uses it on his luggage, but you get the idea. What we find really amazing, though, that trickle-down effect, I want to tell you a story. So recently, the Dutch banks were hacked in the Netherlands. You know, you might have heard of some of these banks. ING Bank, you might have, yes? Okay. Do we know Rabobank? It has also global operations. ABN AMRO? Yeah, okay. So the police arrested the suspect, who was a child. Do you know how much the DDoS, which is a distributed denial of service attack, it's when you send a lot of traffic to one place, a lot of illegitimate traffic by, you know, basically taking down all these other machines, you send a lot of illegitimate traffic. And as a result of sending all that illegitimate traffic, the legitimate traffic can't get there anymore and the server can't respond. So that's called a distributed denial of service attack. How much do you think it costs a kid to go online and buy one in dollars? Just guess. Okay, that's really cheap. I'd like to buy a DDoS service from you. It's not $1. It's $40. So $40, about 30, well, maybe between 35 and 45 euros. You know, it's pretty cheap to buy a DDoS. Imagine you want to push your competitors out of business for a week. It'll probably take you a little bit over $100. That's a good business case, right? So why aren't we all attacking our competition by just giving them massive DDoSes? Their websites, their web shops, nothing else is online anymore. They can't reach their customers. By the way, don't try this at home. Right, especially you, because it's the sort of chuckle of, haha, I'm going to do that next week. So, you know, the idea is that these are more than annoying these days because the scale of the attack is enormous. So we have a sort of asymmetric thing happening, which means it gets more and more cheap to do these attacks. Eventually, we probably will see the $1 attack. By the way, the first 15 minutes are free. That's marketing. So you know, we have a very cheap, organizable attack that any child can launch. And then how many millions do you think it costs a bank to be able to protect themselves from this scale of attack? It costs millions and millions of dollars and euros to do the protection. So this asymmetric nature means that we can handle these large volume or multi-vector, which means there's more than one type of attack happening at the same time. We can't handle it. And these very successful attacks are being launched by your toaster. So, you know, we keep talking the whole day about all these smart devices, all these connected devices. Let me tell you that for me, smart is interchangeable with the word vulnerability. Because we don't make them invulnerable. We make these IoT devices extremely vulnerable and therefore are subject to being taken over and used for a DDoS attack. The largest DDoS attack I've seen that has been involving these IoT devices was 1.2 terabit. It actually brought down critical infrastructure. Can anyone guess what? 1.2 terabit. It's a famous attack. It brought down Netflix. So obviously, no one could Netflix and chill. We saw a spike of global population rates 9 months later. And it's a real problem for us because it meant that, you know, this firing is bad, but it's only getting worse. So before that, 3 years before that, 1.2 terabyte, it was 300 gigs. So we saw a quadrupling of the total amount of traffic in 3 years. So every 3 years, 4 times as much traffic. But then it's going even faster because after the 1.2 terabit attack, we saw, and you see this on my slide in the lower right-hand corner, we saw another attack on GitHub. So those of you in the room that are involved in the development of software will know GitHub. It had a 1.35 terabit attack. GitHub was down for only 15 minutes because they invest a lot of money in keeping GitHub online, even though they suffered this size of attack. There was an unnamed US operator, 1.7 terabyte. That happened on March 5th, and that's the screen you're seeing above you. That's all the traffic that went involved in the DDoS on March 5th. That's what you see is the global DDoS map. So imagine now, this year, we're going to see 2 terabit. I can tell you that the internet exchange, where all of our connectivity is coming in together in different countries around the world, some of those exchanges don't have 2 terabits of capacity. Certainly not for a single customer. So we have a really global problem that is being exploited by individual attackers that don't have a lot of money or resources or whatever, but are executing very successful attacks. So If we keep playing the game that way that we used to play it, we will lose. We have to play differently. One of the things that we set up in the Netherlands, which I think is a model for cooperation all over the world, is the Dutch Continuity Board. And what it does is it brings traditional competitors, different telecom operators and internet service providers and exchange providers. It brings them together, and instead of competing with each other, they collaborate. They're very open and transparent. And what do? They share the information about their attacks. And it's not to help their own customers. They're doing it to help each other's customers, because one day they know it's their attack, the next day it's someone else's, and the following day they'll probably be at it again. So in order to become stronger as a country, we need to think and play cybersecurity game differently. So this is all about cooperation instead of competition. And when you think of total amounts of traffic, you have the Amsterdam Internet Exchange, you have the German Internet Exchange. Those are the top 2 exchanges in the world. And Amsterdam Internet Exchange is joining the board of the Dutch Continuity Board in order to figure out how to stop this. So think about globally, if these are the options, I need you to ask yourself, what is your provider doing? How do you know that your business and your company and your connections aren't going to be impacted by this? Just more as a sort of opportunistic collateral damage instead of a targeted attack. And if you're okay, fine. But if you're not, think about how you can cooperate differently. The other thing that really upsets me is that very often when we know about these attacks, you might think, well, why don't we just take it down? Why don't we go and report it to the police and ask them to bring down the attacks? And the police will tell you it's so hard. We don't know where the attacks are coming from. We can't see what's actually happening here. Well, really? Just use Google. Because if you would go to Google, like the little kid did, and you just Googled stressor or booter, then you'll find all the services that sell this for $40. So if the police would just use Google, we would be able to take down all of the sites that are offering these services. Let me tell you, I have been doing this for a while, and so I have a lot of colleagues that are working on this, and none of us see a valid reason for these kinds of services to exist in this manner. There is not a single valid reason. Another thing that amazes me, for which there is also no single valid reason, is this ability to spoof traffic. Spoofing something means pretending to be something you're not. So when you have a DDoS, if everybody used the real address, their real IP address, we could find them. And we could find them and stop them. But what do? They fake their addresses. In order for this type of attack to be successful, your ISP and your operator have to allow you to fake your address. In the Netherlands, no operator allows this. We made it mandatory that in order to work together and exchange traffic between each other, spoofing traffic is not allowed. In Thailand, we see that there's a lot of spoof traffic. And I need to ask you, I can tell you there is no valid reason, none. There's no technical reason, there's no business case, there is no valid reason to spoof traffic. We should stop it. So why don't we? I looked this up for Thailand, and I can tell you that there are several networks. You can also see this on kaida.org. I don't want to name the organization because you may be in the room, but but you should look on kaida.org for the networks that are spoofing traffic. What I can tell you is that the organization that is allowing all this traffic, one of the things they support in Thailand is the Thai Senate. So they are providing connectivity for the Thai government and allowing spoof traffic. Why are we doing this? We should stop this now. And I don't understand what's holding us back when we know about the problem. One person who's actually going to help us stop it globally is this happy camper. This happy camper, actually, his name is Jaya Santana, and he invented a tool that basically fingerprints every single type of boot or stressor service there is, and then allows you to take the traffic, if you've ever had an attack, and load it up to this service, and it'll tell you what type of boot or stressor was involved in your attack. You could also do it on-prem. You don't have to share any data that would be privacy infringing, so you just download his free tool, free, and then do it on your own office, figure out who it is, and then give that information to the police. Let them take it down, and you say, here you go, I have proof of a crime, go get the bad guys. We should be doing that everywhere. So it really upsets me that we don't. And what we see is that was the fun. We can DDoS for fun. but we can also do illegal things for profit. And like I showed you with the first slide with Wannacry, it is not a question of, if you will ever be affected by ransomware, but when you will be affected by ransomware. And really, I have to tell you a story because it involves a friend of mine. I was on the EU high-level steering committee for quantum stuff, and there was a very nice gentleman who I knew, and he recently, 2 weeks ago, told me about his father-in-law. His father-in-law owns a small medium enterprise, less than 10,000 people in Germany, and they were affected. The entire company was hit with an email that was clicked on, a link that was clicked on from an email, and then the company was encrypting its entire back-end database. Everything was encrypted with ransomware. They couldn't get to anything. And then the hackers sent this email. If you don't comply, we are going to give your customer data, we're going to put it on the internet. So all of your company information and your customer data will be released on the internet. So we suggest you pay us. So they asked for a significant amount of money, roughly about $300,000 US in Bitcoin payments. And what we saw is when you analyze it, it was BitPaymer. And BitPaymer is an evolution of older malware. So originally, the older malware that was there was called Dridex. Dridex was a banking Trojan to steal money from the banks. But then it evolved to something called fried eggs. Get it? Fried eggs? Dried eggs? Okay. They evolved, they were ransomware. They just basically had a good business model. It was a successful campaign of ransomware and malware. And they thought, okay, if we just change this bit, then it's no longer detectable. We'll get through the antivirus and everything else, and let's just make sure it succeeds. And sure enough, they're making lots of money with this. Until he paid the ransom, because the German police did not help him. He had to pay the ransom. And he basically, got the key, and they were able to decrypt it. But this goes against everything we believe in. And their ability, the criminal ability to find an attack vector, improve it, recycle it, and make it undetectable for us is so good. But our ability to find them is only getting worse every day. And I have to ask you, why is this? Why aren't our resources and our interconnectivity as good as the criminals? And, if you think of the biggest banking heist in history, some of you may know it, it's called Carbanak. Carbanak was actually an attack on the SWIFT payment banking system. Everybody knows SWIFT. But the way that they attacked SWIFT was by getting to the weakest part of that chain. It was the Bangladeshi central bank. They hacked that. And then via the Bangladeshi central bank, they were able to exchange over $1 billion. It was the biggest and best banking heist in history thus far. But it points to the fact that our resilience is only as good as every member that's a part of it. So we need to get more resilient. An opportunity comes when really we think more about working together and solving the problem than worrying about who gets the credit for the solution. So what happened here is when Europol worked together with the Dutch police, as well as McAfee and Kaspersky, who hate each other, by the way, and instead of hating each other, they thought, okay, screw it, we have a problem, the world needs a solution. One of the biggest pieces of advice when you have ransomware is never, ever to pay. Never pay. Because you don't know that you will actually get something in return for your payment. And what No More Ransom does is if you get ransomware, you can upload a bit of the ransomware. It'll tell you what kind of ransomware you have, and you can actually look for the decryption key. So it'll give you free sets of decryption keys. That means globally, if every single police organization on Earth, when they dealt with ransomware locally, if they would just have the decryption keys loaded to this, we could help all of the global network that had ransomware. And furthermore, how many of you have had a cyber criminal-like incident and reported it? Okay, first of all, I find that very hard to believe. How many of you have not reported? There you go. So there are hands of people who why aren't we reporting it? We're skewing the numbers. We're not illustrating the size of the problem, either locally or internationally, which means the effort that's going to be involved to fix this also won't be there. So we really need to report these incidents. And I really believe that, the only real solution, by the way, for ransomware, it's very simple. Make sure you're not vulnerable to the attack and make sure you do regular backups. That is not sexy advice. It's not like, go look for hackers. No, this is not sexy. It's one of those structural things that we need to do, and as a result, we don't do it enough. And we need to really watch out. I want to tell you that, like, when we look for, what makes this all possible, this underground economy, it's basically what we have when you see something called the darknet. The darknet is something that we enabled via Tor for Tor hidden sites or .onion sites. And what I found is, I am not a Thai citizen, but how many Thai citizens have a national identity card? A Thai national identity card, yes? Well, I can get one too. And it will cost me about $31 US. So I found a forger. This is from yesterday, by the way, just to be very clear. Yesterday, I went online to see what could I get. So I went on different darknet sites, and I wanted to see what can I get that would be cool to have if I was in Thailand and wanted to do something illegal. So I found that I could go and purchase a forged national ID card. Just kind of handy. I'm not joking. This is all real. So just so we're clear. Yeah, and that's actually the name KingScan of the guy who's doing it. We don't know who he really is. He asks for payment in Monero. So, you can go ahead and pay him in Monero or in Bitcoin, and you can go get mailed this. And this is not the only thing you can buy on the darknet. It won't surprise you to find out that pretty much everything you want to do that would be remotely illegal, you can purchase. Either services or products, you can get this on the underground. And I went through several sites. I offended someone. But you can go on the underground, you can find all of this stuff. And what we also see is, even if, you're worried about doing all of this yourself, you can also purchase someone to hack for you. You can also purchase, like if you don't have a lot of Monero or Bitcoin, one of the things you can do is use cryptojacking or mining. So if you work at a company, you can buy, what's on the right-hand side, a Monero miner. And you can unleash it on your corporate resources, and what it will do is it will mine Monero for you. So after you let it run havoc, you've got a lot of Monero to pay for new identity cards. Okay, so really, this is trading in both open and closed areas. We know that this is there. We know we have it enabled, and there's a giant database of people using it. What I worry about is not just the cybercriminal threat, but what I worry the most about, which makes me awake at night, is this state-sponsored attack. And this is a real picture as well. This is the F-35. You might know it, the Joint Strike Fighter. So this is the F-35. This is a real picture. It's flying over the city of Rotterdam. Our new headquarters is just past that white bridge. So our building is there. Here's the cool thing about this. This is a sort of Internet of Things device. It can be flown as a fully unmanned aircraft. No human has to occupy this thing. It's kind of like your IoT toaster, okay? It's just as secure as well. The difference between your IoT toaster that's fully connected and can be operated remotely, just like this, is that this thing, the F-35, has a nuclear payload. Slight difference in the toaster. It has numerous issues with internet security, and it's been continuously redesigned. But this is an area that we all need to pay attention to. It's called the fifth dimension of warfare. So we have land warfare, air, sea, space, and the fifth dimension is cyber. And it should not surprise you to know that we don't have a Geneva Convention for cyber warfare. So there is no prohibition on attacking civilian as well as non-military targets. We saw that when we saw Wannacry expand also to the NHS, the national hospitals in the United Kingdom. So really, what are we doing as a community to prevent that we have innocent people being hurt by these kinds of actions? It's because of the fact that we've screwed up our national priorities. We find it more important to attack than to defend. We find it more important to gather all communications than to think about how we actually guarantee the integrity of that information. We really have, right now, if you pay attention, World War III. It is happening right now. And all of the global cyber agreements, that's nonsense. They're not real. Take a look at what's really happening. If you pay attention to just the telecommunications network, you'll see it. You'll see it even though it's covert, it's all digital, and it's incredibly asymmetric, which means it's a lot easier to attack than to defend. The only thing we can do, that you can do at home, in your companies, in any place where you interact online, is to really decrease the footprint that is available for the opponent to attack you. That means make sure your stuff is more secure than they are able to attack against. So for us, as a telecom operator, we had a sort of age of innocence, that was gone when we saw a fellow telecom operator that was severely hacked. And they were hacked by people who we thought they would never want to hack us. They need us. And it was the NSA and GCHQ. They together cooperated to hack Belgium in Belgium. They hacked the International Carrier Services Division. And what they did to hack them was to actually create an entire malware framework. To do this is really expensive. The business case here is ridiculous. So they used all kinds of digital weapons which they crafted into this framework, and they very effectively attacked Belgium. Not because they were interested in Belgium, but because they were interested in the customers that Belgium had. And really, like, some of you might think, oh, it's so boring, it's, well, whatever, I have nothing to hide. These are governments, why should I care? Well, the bottom line is, if you actually looked at Regin, which was the tool, the malware framework, and you actually looked at the confirmed infections by sector and type, you would see that the largest amount of victims were actually small, medium enterprises and private individuals. So you may not know it, but you're just as much as part of the attack surface as the state-sponsored targets. So please pay attention to this space, because it does mean a lot for us. Some of us get really depressed when we look at the size and scale of the resources. The NSA has all these strategic partnerships with really large companies like Cisco and Intel and Microsoft and Quest and Motorola, etc., Qualcomm. So it seems like they can attack us across the entire IT stack. This is a Snowden document. It's also real. And it becomes really difficult for us then to think about how do we then accomplish information security best practice like confidentiality, integrity, availability. Well, most of us in countries that are sensitive to these kinds of things, what tends to happen in that local legislation, it leads to a sort of trend to look for products that wouldn't have this attack surface. So then to look for potentially subpar, not as good as products compared to Qualcomm or Cisco, et cetera. It makes us look for non-US products because we can't trust the US. And I think what's happening now globally, where we have this backlash for looking to national products which may not be there or might be there but are not as good, is really very detrimental for our entire internet economy. And we need to be able to do this differently. We need to still be able to cooperate. And really, the threat that's looming on top of us for all of these products, and even the non-US products, are 0 days. 0 days are the digital weapons that are made where even the manufacturer doesn't know about them. You might remember the case of FBI versus Apple. Do you remember this? Where there was a San Bernardino case and the FBI wanted to find a way to attack Apple devices. Well, they finally bought a 0 day from Cellbrite in Israel, which is an attack tool, which Apple didn't know about. It was an attack vector that Apple had to find out about after the FBI bought this stuff and told them about it. And there's another Apple 0 day that FBI had to tell Apple about. So really, you should understand that there's a very big economic incentive to having a market for 0 days. And it's both on the dark market, like that we talked about, but also on the white market, and they're just being traded. And you have to ask yourself, do you want to be a part of this? Because governments worldwide are the ones who are buying and they are creating. And I call it the Three Musketeers principle. They're doing it all to get to one single target. But that one single target that they're after could potentially be the downfall of all of us. So it's all for one, one for all. We will all suffer from that attack that they have via that single vulnerability, because we all use Apple devices. And you know what's really crappy is in order to get to these 0 days, they don't build them all themselves. They don't always buy them as well. They let them be created. They usually outsource in order to have this creation happen. And the companies they outsource to also get hacked. So we saw, yeah, that's the fun part of this. So what we see is an entire age of digital mercenaries. So we see groups like the Italian hacking team. They got hacked, and they got hacked quite notably, and their client list was divulged all over the world. And we saw that regimes that we thought were quite democratic weren't as democratic as we thought they were. And then we also saw that the Equation Group, which was an outfit operating exclusively for the NSA, was also hacked. They were hacked by a group calling themselves the Shadow Brokers. Some of you may have read this in the news because this is the case revolving around Kaspersky. So basically, very complicated story. NSA outsources hacking to Equation Group. Equation Group employee takes some of his work at work to his home computer. On his home computer, he's running Kaspersky antivirus. He turns off Kaspersky antivirus in order to install some tools that he downloaded from the internet, which were basically registry keys for running Windows. He's building the 0 days on his home computer. Turns off Kaspersky, turns it back on again. Kaspersky runs a system scan, finds the 0 day material, sends it into the cloud version because he's using the free version of Kaspersky, of course. So Kaspersky then sends this into the cloud. The Israelis claim, the Mossad, that they were hacking Kaspersky at the same time. So they saw that Kaspersky was holding on to these O days. And this is why there is a ban on Kaspersky. I'm sure you were all asking, why is this happening? That's why. But it's not confirmed. We don't know what really happened. There is not a single shred of evidence that actually tells us that Kaspersky did anything wrong other than act like every single antivirus does in the world, which is if it's in my signature database, I then detect it and block it, or I, like do something with it. And if it's not in my signature database, but I still don't trust it, I upload it to the cloud to let it be analyzed for further inclusion in the database. What's new about that? So we have to really think when it comes to this kind of stuff. By the way, I don't know if you know what the Shadow Brokers did. They also saw the business case in here. They ran an auction online via Twitter. Starting price, 10 million for the 0 days they uncovered by hacking the Equation Group. So there is a strong business model to hack for a cyber criminal, but also for a state actor. And what we should realize, like some countries in the world do realize, is the threat of surveillance is for us all. It is there as individuals, but it is also there as countries. That's an NRO satellite, National Reconnaissance Office. They regularly put spy satellites up into the air with scary patches. I think this must be a fun group, because they have a scary patch every time they launch a satellite, like nothing is beyond our reach, with the giant octopus sucking on the Earth. No, we don't do anything weird. So there's, we actually are enabling this also through our national legislation. I think we need to understand how we can protect it. One answer to protect ourselves from this mass surveillance is using good, strong cryptography. However, the use of good, strong cryptography means that we have secure hardware systems that we use it on, secure operating systems, protocols, applications, as well as understanding who we're using the cryptography for and what type of data we're trying to keep secure and from whom. If we don't understand that, even the good crypto will fail. So really, the elephant in the room is the fact that the hardware and software vendors all over the world have an extremely strong lobby where they take lawmakers and policymakers out to lunch and dinner, and as a result get exempted from most of the legislation that is applied to everybody else. In the EU, it's the Network and Information Security Directive. Every sector, telecom, healthcare, transport, everyone has to comply to the NIS except for hardware and software makers. It was a really good lunch in Brussels. So as a result, they don't have to do it. And I think fundamentally, all of this comes back to the user. You have to then do security correct in order to get out of the security mess. And what we see is we don't do it correctly. It's always our fault when it goes wrong. But it doesn't have to be. And we don't have to keep trying to figure out who did it in order to get our security in order. You might remember that during the North Korean Olympics, there was a lot of malware and the Olympic operation was shut down. Do you guys remember that? It was called Olympic Destroyer. And the initial reports that the South Korean Olympics were hacked by the North Koreans using Olympic Destroyer. But this is an example of a false flag operation. The actual malware came from Russia. We just couldn't tell the difference. So don't worry about attribution. Don't worry who did it. The fact that it exists is the problem that we want to solve. And it shouldn't make us knee-jerk respond to creating legislation where we want to hack these countries that are doing this. So what I ask all of you to do is to demand security. You can do it. You can make things secure for yourself without actually resorting to these underground futile tactics like hacking back. Update yourself. Upgrade when possible. Use antivirus, passphrases, backups, two-factor authentication, a VPN when you can, encryption, secure apps. How many of you use Signal? More of you should. Thank you. Know when not to click. It's a simple thing that'll save your online life. And finally, we should learn to move from this aggressive cyber war-like politic and move towards cyber peace. We need to de-escalate the situation, not engage in hostile escalatory attacks. And we need to work together and be open and transparent in order to actually achieve our objectives. Finally, every day we hear something new about Facebook. I want you to know that this is not some reality that we have to accept. We need to never, ever stop saying, what if there was an alternative? Because really, there is a call to do that. And one of the projects that I very strongly support that's going to be a Kickstarter soon is OpenBook. And it's an answer to Facebook. We're doing this because we think it's the right thing to do. So if you want to take a look, there is an answer out there. I just urge you to go start looking for it. Openbook.org. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.